Welcome everyone. Welcome to Global Destination Sustainability Movement Asia Pacific Forum. My name is Peter Lee. I'm Managing Director of 고향 Convention and Visitors Bureau. 여러분 안녕하십니까? 저는 고향 컨벤션 뷰로 안 나온 거죠? 고향 컨벤션 뷰로 이상열 단장입니다. 여러분을 그 글로벌 데스티네이션 서스테너빌리티 무브먼트 아시아 패시픽 포럼에서 인사드리게 된 것을 대단히 감사하게 생각하고 다시 한번 환영의 말씀을 드립니다. 글로벌 데스티네이션 서스테너빌리티 무브먼트 아시아 패시픽 포럼은 아시아에서 데스티네이션 서스테너빌리티를 주제로 하는 첫 번째 정규적인 행사입니다. 오늘 이런 뜻깊은 자리를 통해서 갈수록 그 중요성이 더해지고 있는 데스티네이션 서스테너빌리티에 대해서 함께 논의하고 그 토론의 장을 갖게 된 것을 다시 한번 기쁘게 생각합니다. 특히 오늘 정말 좋은 연사분들이 많이 참석해 주셨습니다. 그리고 또 우리 GDSI 글로벌 데스티네이션 서스테너빌리티 인덱스 팀이 굉장히 좋은 주제와 그리고 연사분들을 초대해 주셨기 때문에 아주 뜻깊은 그리고 논의의 장이 될 것이라고 지식의 공유의 장이 될 것이라고 생각을 합니다. 그럼 오늘 전체적인 우리 글로벌 데스티네이션 서스테너빌리티 무브먼트 아시아 패시픽 포럼을 전체적으로 진행해 주실 오늘의 좌장분을 모시도록 하겠습니다. 저는 저의 가장 친한 친구이고 그리고 또 하나는 이 데스티네이션 서스테너빌리티 분야에 있어서 특히 미팅 인더스트리 서스테너빌리티 분야에 있어서 세계적인 파이오니아인 가이 비구드 님을 큰 박수로 모시도록 하겠습니다. Hello, Guy. Please take my microphone.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Peter. Thank you for a fine welcome. And good afternoon to many of you in Korea and around Asia Pacific. We are, I'm delighted to be here, absolutely delighted to be here. I wish I was actually in Korea with Peter, but that's not going to be today. But I'm delighted to present to kick off a really fine few hours of content and stimulation and inspiration about sustainability and regeneration in our visitors economy and especially within the MICE industry. So I'm just going to share my screen a second here. And here we go. Okay. So this is our first kind of Asia Pacific forum. So I thank Peter for the inspiration and a kind of kick up the backside from him for us to kind of do this. Peter and Goyang have been amazing leaders in sustainability, and I really appreciate his work that he's done in the region to kind of put sustainability at the forefront of the conversation. And as you can see from his program this week, it's been a solid debate and conversation. So I was with Peter a couple of years ago, and if you remember, Peter, I brought my bike along and I grabbed the bike and I cycled from one length of Korea to the other, and I spent an amazing time exploring the wonders of South Korea, really from the top, from the border with North Korea all the way down to Busan. And that was a great journey. And I think really, you know, sustainability is a journey for many of us who've been on this a long time. And for those who haven't, you know, we're all at different points of that journey. And today we kind of want to help you along that journey, wherever you are. We want to kind of educate you with the content and give you some new knowledge. We want to inspire you to go to that next step. And we want to activate you to actually stop talking and start doing. Or as I say, less conversation, more action. So we have a fantastic agenda. We've really put together an amazing few hours of content. It's going to start with an amazing session from Ed Gillespie talking about the future we want. Ed is a futurist. He's going to be talking about what's happening in the world and how this is going to impact us. Noah and I will be sharing some content about trends in the MICE industry and some best practices from other destinations around the world. Peter's going to talk about what he's been doing. my team and Peter's team, we've been working a while on their strategy. So Pete's going to talk about that, which is a fantastic piece of regional best practice. Jessica's going to be talking about impact strategy and how we move and create even more impact and then measure it and report on it. And then we have a wonderful discussion with 3 leaders from 3 different destinations. So we have Birgit from Helsinki, Katie from Sydney, Louisa from Berlin. And so we're going to have a really rich conversation, some 3 different presentations there. And then our Melissa's going to wrap it all up. Melissa's our chief storyteller at the GDS, and she's going to tell us a little story about what's happening and how we tell better stories and engage people through stories. So that's the next few hours. I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to hand you over now to my right-hand man here, Noah, who's going to take us to the next step.
Wonderful. Thank you, Guy. So just one additional note regarding the housekeeping for this session is that we will have a little Q&A after one of the presentations. However, due to time constraints, not so many. So please, if you do have questions, write them in the chat or in the Q&A and we'll get to them. If you would like to ask a question in person, do write that in the chat also, and I can make sure that you're able to speak to the panel. And yeah, to get us started, I think I would like us all to interact a little bit as much as is possible in this virtual space using some polls, which I'm sure you've heard of before. So I'll bring those 2 up to get us started. Yeah. And the first question is, how would you rank your organization's integration of sustainability across the business? So please just select one of the 4 answers there. And to the translators, in case there's some people here that can't read English so well, maybe you could also translate those answer options. I'd appreciate that. And I'll give you around 1 minute to respond. Okay, first answers are coming in. Okay, so far it seems like for question 1, there's a tendency for more improvers to be in the race. So most people are just beginning, most organizations are just beginning a few sustainability projects. There's also quite a lot of laggards who are not integrating anything yet. Well, in this case, this session will be right for you. And then, okay, a few more clicking advanced, okay. Okay, well, I'll wait for a little bit longer. I'll give you 30 more seconds. So far, we have about 50% of the participants having responded. So everyone else, please get active in computers and get clicking. Okay, I think in the interest of time, I'll stop it there and the poll. And as you'll all be able to see, for the first poll, right, how would you rank your organization's integration of sustainability across the business? The largest number, 36%, are currently improvements. So just beginning with a few sustainability projects, whereas advanced, where it's been integrated into most of the organization's initiative, and laggard, where there's no integration taking place yet, are about equal at 24%. The minority is in the leadership group, which is to be expected. Now for question number 2, which is how has the interest and focus of sustainability in your organization changed over the past year? It's very clear that overall there's much more focus. 36% of the participants have selected that answer, and also that a lot, 40% need guidance. So again, it seems like this session is perfect for us, for you. So now to get us started, I'd like to introduce Ed Gillespie. And Ed Gillespie is an author, having written about his flight-free adventure around the world. He is also co-host of an iTunes chart-topping podcast, John Richardson and the Futurenauts, and The Great Humbling. And the list goes on. As Guy mentioned, he's also the resident futurist at the Gds Movement, amongst other things, but really his core talent is to take on the complex and the interconnected challenges of the world, and challenges that we face, and make common sense of them for non-specialist audiences. So I'm delighted to welcome Ed on stage now to do just that.
Thank you very much indeed, Noah, and good morning to everyone. It's an absolute delight to be joining you. I am here, obviously, coming from South Norfolk in England. It's very early in the morning. I have also had the pleasure of coming to Korea previously. I was there for the World Ecology Congress on Jeju, the honeymoon island, a few years ago. But today I'm going to be talking to you about the future we want, some of these big interconnected challenges which are coming at us. So welcome to the apocalypse. I don't mean apocalypse as in the end of the world. What I mean is as in the drawing back of the veil, the revelation, the exposure of the pipework underneath the way the world works, and the fact that we're all getting to look at it and see that it's perhaps been plumbed in a rather unfortunate and challenging fashion. Now, about 18 months ago, I gave a talk at the Bank of England about what we might call low probability but high impact risks. And at that talk, I said, we are giving ourselves 3 key comfortable myths, which are acting as a kind of soporific effect for us. We feel like we know what's going on and what's likely to happen over the next 5 to 15 years, that we have a sense of control, and that whatever happens, we will find a way to tame the challenges, and we understand what leadership will be required, and that our decision-making institutions are up to the job. Now, I put it to you that those are 3 key comfortable myths, because what we're facing at the moment is these low probability but very high impact challenges. Now, extreme climate change is obviously one of those. And at that talk at the Bank of England, we identified 3. And this was in January 2020. We said it's basically extreme climate change impacts, economic crises, and pandemics. And we are currently facing all 3 as we're in the middle of this existing pandemic. Because we've become very familiar with this idea of introducing protective measures, from masks to lockdowns, to bring the number of COVID cases down within the healthcare system capacity. So reducing this into a manageable load and reducing chronic illness and fatalities. We could apply exactly the same logic to the climate change challenge. So bringing the climate protective measures in to bring down global temperature change within that 2 degree or ideally 1.5 degree threshold that the Paris Agreement requires. But the difference perhaps between the pandemic and climate change, as Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, said, is we can't self-isolate from climate change. And for those of you who haven't read the 4,000 pages of the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, which was out a week or so ago, I'll offer just a quick summary just to bring us right up to speed together on the urgency and scale of this challenge. So firstly, the report is pretty clear. Humans are responsible for this particular issue. It's unequivocal, it's unprecedented, and actually we now have some changes in the system which are both inevitable and irreversible. It's going to get warmer. Climate change is actually global warming. We've changed the terminology, but temperatures are going to keep on rising. They've risen about 1.1 degree since 1850. We are going to get 1.5 degrees in all scenarios by 2040. 5 of the past hottest years on record are in the last 5 years. And we're pretty much going to get 2 degrees by the end of the century, unless we begin to have drastic action now. And we know that the felt experience, the lived experience of extreme weather is changing people's perception and understanding of this challenge. So the increased frequency of severe heat waves, the intensification of tropical cyclones, particularly in Asia, increased precipitation and these catastrophic floods which have been happening around the world, and the increased severity of droughts and how often they occur. plus these terrible fire seasons, which are longer and more intense from California to Australia to Turkey. So we know that the felt experience is shifting. Plus, we have areas of the world which are warming much faster than others. So the Arctic is warming twice as quickly as the rest of the world. And we could probably see a summer without any sea ice in the Arctic at least once by 2050. Of particular relevance to Asia, and the last time I was in Singapore, I gave a talk about Asian coastal cities and the challenge of rising sea levels. And even at 1.5 degrees of climate change, we could see 2 to 3 meters of sea level rise. Coastal flooding has already doubled since the 60s. These coastal surges that used to occur once in a century could be annual by the end of the century. And the current rate of sea level rise is about 3 times what it was in the first 3/4 of the 20th century. So all of that is some pretty challenging issues for us to address, and we are running out of time. We've emitted about 2.4 trillion tons of carbon dioxide since the mid-1800s, which has brought that 1.1 degree climate change to our table. Our global carbon budget collectively and cumulatively is about 400 billion tons, which gives us a 66% chance of reaching 1.5 degrees. And our annual emissions are about 40 billion tons a year. So we have less than 10 years to turn this around. So this is irreversible changes we're dealing with on timescales of centuries to millennia. And also the oceans and ice have absorbed almost all of that global heating, which is going to mean an increased melt and rising sea levels. So we need to think about this. One moment, that is my daughter. 1 second. Come here. Come on. Come and sit with me. Come and sit with me. Come and sit with me. So we're just giving a talk, okay? So we have to think about this as a series of waves. A COVID-19 wave, which is already broken, and an economic recession wave, and then a climate change wave coming in behind that, and a wave of biodiversity collapse. On top of this, we have the economics of biodiversity, which are also creating additional challenges. Now, the Das-Gupta review in the UK has shown that we've increased the produced capital per person and the infrastructure by 2-fold over the last 25 years. And we have the human capital per person. You want some water? There we go. And the human capital per person has increased by 13%, but we've drawn down on the natural capital per person, the sources, regulators and sinks by 40%. Now that's to do with an institutional failure of $4 to $6 trillion a year of perverse subsidies. So what's happening here is we need to actually increase nature's supply and ensure our demand on that supply does not exceed nature's capacity. And we have to change our measures of economic success. It's a systemic and institutional transformation that is required. It's all right, sausage, it's all right. So what this shows in terms of the nature-related financial risks is that these are threefold. These are physical, and these are about transition, and these are about litigation. It's okay, sausage. So basically, we have a big short on ecology. We have a big short, Helen.
I need to wipe my face.
You need to wipe your face. There we go. There we go. All right. We have a big short on ecology. Those of you seen the Hollywood movie about the challenges of the collateralized debt obligations and credit default swaps will know that what was happening in that big short was the undermining of the financial capital that was underpinning it. And basically we're involved in a big ecological short, drawing down on our natural capital. Earth Overshoot Day, the day when we actually start to go into ecological debt, occurs in late July. So we spend 5 months of the year drawing down on that natural capital. Charles Handy, the management guru, says this is an age of unreason, where we have to have bold imagining and we have to think the unlikely and do the unreasonable. So circling back to those 3 key comfortable myths, what we actually face are three key uncomfortable truths. One, that we face unknown unknowns. There is stuff going to come down the track which is going to be very difficult. Secondly, we are very much not in control, and it would be hubristic and arrogant to suggest otherwise. And thirdly, that leadership is just part of the mix for responsible organizing. We will see just as much emphasis on grassroots action from below as we will coming down from the top. And I like to think about this as 7th-generation thinking, not in the classic Native American sense of looking at the impact 7 generations hence, but actually to look at us. I know you're sick. So we have to look about this as our generation as the pivotal generation in a span of influence. We have inherited a world from our great-grandparents, which was very, very different for them. And we have to bequeath and gift a world to our great-grandchildren, which is safe and healthy and environmentally secure. Now that, it gives us a huge responsibility. And we need to think of ourselves as the pivotal generation, making the right choices to become good ancestors. And as my favorite author, Tyson Yunkaporta, the Australian Aboriginal writer, says, we're at the start of a 1,000-year undertaking because that's how long it will take the old growth forests to return. So Guy and Noah will talk a bit more about this later, but basically we are on a journey from degenerative to regenerative, and sustainability is just a stepping stone on that journey. And Anna Pollock, one of the great thinkers in this regenerative tourism space, talks about this as a maturation of sustainability, where we go from treating the world like a machine, working with our shareholders and stakeholders, to looking at the world as a living system, where we get into community and planet. And it's not just about net positive impact, but it is that restorative, regenerative piece. We have to build back that natural capital and avoid this ecological debt. So in that regard, and for the global tourism and destination management movement, regenerative business is actually the only future. This is the way we're going to get through this pinch point. And we have to be honest with ourselves that it's going to get really bumpy. I think this is going to be challenging. The last 18 months have obviously been extremely challenging for this sector, which is still the world's biggest industry. But perhaps we have a unique moment and opportunity in time now for a reboot, a rethink, and a redesign. As Mikkel Aro Hansen, head of Wonderful Copenhagen, said in a TEDx talk early last year, we need to think of tourism as a resource in service to the global transformation required. So how do we use tourism and destination management and inspiration to help us do what needs to be done? Because the race to net zero is on. The destination is agreed. It's only how fast we get there that counts. Because right now, we are loving the world to death. We know that several destinations around the world are already taking dramatic measures, from Amsterdam to Barcelona to Venice, because of the over-tourism that is literally killing those places for the very reasons that were originally inspiring us to visit them. And I quite like Doxy's irritation index, which my daughter is probably experiencing right now, but the level of irritation that host communities start to experience, where we go through the different phases of euphoria and the initial emergence and development of tourism, to apathy, to annoyance, to outright antagonism. And this is another balance we have to strike to make sure that the people who live in these destinations also enjoy the benefits and the balance of tourism and visitors. And perhaps we need to think about that as a tourism built on natural principles that comes from a sense of biomimicry, of understanding the natural ways that the world might run itself, to be fully human, to have this alchemical communing, this connection between people as human beings, the wonderful mix of culture and contrast that obviously incentivizes a lot of travel. And to have this expressed as a holistic and healthy ideal. And I'm sure some of the destinations who will be sharing their insights later will touch on many of these points. Because as the head of Trade and Export Council in New Zealand said, the world is hunting for health. We're hunting for countries that care for their people and care for their environment. How do we celebrate our collective possibility through a different type of tourism? And I think we're in for a shakedown. We have those brave organizations and those brave businesses and brave thinkers who are courageously stepping into a very different world. Now, they are the pioneers of a better future. At the same time, we have the dead. We have the old guard, the resistors of change, those who are holding back the potential for transformation. And I think it will end up being quite binary. Those who step into the future we want and need right now will do much better in the coming years than those who try and perpetuate or continue business as usual. And in some sense, we have to challenge what the Southern Italians call omerta, which is the mafia code of silence. We have to break this omerta. We have to speak with our hearts. We have to trust our gut instinct. And then we have to use our minds and our intelligence to navigate the difficult pathway that we've been given. But that requires us to speak out. That requires us to challenge the orthodoxy, and that requires us to think and do things very differently. Because if we try and build back better, if we try and get back to that normal that was supposedly there before the pandemic, it's a bit like Darth Vader saying the construction of our new Death Star is an amazing job creation opportunity. It is indeed, Darth. Unfortunately, it also destroys planets. So my challenge to you today is that only the impossible is interesting. Extinction Rebellion are back on the streets of the UK and around the world this week, saying that only the impossible is interesting. And that is where we have to take our imagination and our energy, because it's very easy to get caught in a binary position between projected hope and projected hopelessness. And projected hope will give the false optimism, the promise that we can fix this, that is a problem to be solved. It is not. It is a transition, and it is intergenerational, and it is about adaptation as much as it is about mitigation. So we should be a little bit cautious around some of that revolutionary or messianic approach. On the other side, we have the projected hopelessness, the fatalistic resignation that it's too big, too ugly, too scary, too late. Or we write off people as being hedonistic, nihilistic, and misanthropic. Where we all need to sit as leaders in destination management is on the middle of that tightrope between those two opposing cliffs, and to do so with humor, to be able to laugh at ourselves, with humility, to be able to get down on our knees, and also with hyper self-reflectivity, to continue to ask ourselves the most difficult and challenging of questions. Because ultimately, as the civil rights movement has described, and Amnesty International have used, and as well as with the pandemic, and also now with climate change and biodiversity loss, none of us are safe until all of us are safe. So this is genuinely something we have to do together through strange partnerships, through new alliances and allegiances, and all focusing on what the global goal of getting to 1.5 degrees and protecting our wild nature means in practice. Because the planet doesn't need to be saved. The planet will probably be okay. It doesn't even need to be changed. What our planet needs is to be loved and valued and appreciated, to have that sense of reverence and adoration once again. This is not a utilitarian approach. This is something that should be making our hearts sing, which Melissa will talk about later on. And I will leave you with one of my favorite quotes, which has haunted me for a decade or so when I first spotted it in an art exhibition, which is an old Tibetan Buddhist quote, which was illustrated by the artist monk Tashi Mannix. And it says, the wise learn from the past, the brave learn from the future. And in the context of our interdependent and interconnected challenges and achieving the future we want, we will learn some things from our previous experience which will be useful. But the future is sending us a very, very clear signal. And it is the courageous and brave who learn from the challenges that have been put in front of us that will help shape the better tomorrow that we so desperately need. I apologize for my poor sick daughter. You can see I'm a full-time single father, so I have to care for her even when I am presenting to an esteemed international audience around the world. So thank you for your patience and understanding in that regard.
Thank you, Ed. And I think one thing you said on your speech is we've got to deal with some challenges on this journey, and I think you had a challenge this morning, so well done for managing that. And I hope you feel better, because yeah, so have a great day. So let's kind of pick up from where Ed was saying. He kind of really very clearly explained what was happening here around the world. Many of us are seeing that, are living that, are understanding that. But I think a lot of us aren't really accepting the challenges that we're going to face. So let's take this forward into what's happening in the events industry. So Noah and I are going to jump into something now. So let me share the screen. Good. Next one. Good. Okay, so we're going to talk about this regenerative revolution that Ed started to mention. Because in response to everything Ed just talked about, there is a revolution. There's a sustainability revolution, and I'm going to throw out to you there's a regenerative revolution. The only way that we can fix what's going to happen, or even just live with what's going to happen, is to start regenerating socially, economically, environmentally, at a pace that we've never seen before. So you've got cities here like London, and this is a projection of what London could look like if we start to really, really invest in nature and green spaces in the city. But I think you guys in Korea are one of the leading thinkers of this, and having spent a lot of time in Korea, I love the way your rivers and nature's really brought into the city. So you guys understand that. And this revolution, or I like to say is kind of a tsunami of sustainability, is really hitting our industry. In a recent survey from booking.com of 29,000 people from around the world, 61% now said they want to travel more sustainably, a massive increase after COVID. So things are changing there. And then there's an opportunity that's growing. So 72% of the same people, they said, us, the people that run this industry, .96% of them in January last year, or actually this was in October last year, said that sustainability is important or critical for their future. I believe these numbers have gone up. I think we're probably at 98% or something. It was 5% less before COVID, so we've seen this shift. When I first did this, I think it was at 5% in 2004. By 2008, we're up to 11%. So it has totally tipped the market since we started this work. 90% of CEOs now today in Europe are saying sustainability is critical for their future plans. And so as Ed was saying, we have to do the shift. We have to do the shift from thinking degeneratively and not really thinking or caring about the impacts of our meetings, our events, the tourism, the visitors. We have to go beyond sustainability, which was about patching. We did, let's recycle 10% of our waste. Let's reduce 10% of our carbon emissions. We have to go to the whole next step, which is really about leaving destinations better after the events, after the tourists and visitors that we bring into it. So how can we do, how can we absorb even more carbon emissions from events than the way we create? How can we recycle and give back to the communities even more than our event created? So this thinking is a practical thinking, but it's also a mindset change. And so it's a mindset change about how do we use tourism and the events that we organize? How do we enable flourishing, inclusive and equitable communities, really catalyze our communities? How do we sparkle an even more thriving local economy? How do we enrich the visitors, the residents and the industry and their well-being? Everyone who participates, how do we make them better after and before our work? And how do we nurture and restore our natural ecosystems, the rivers, the forests, the mountains? So that's the concept of regeneration at a very high level. Our work is working with cities around the world at the GDS. We work with 75, I think 77 cities around the world. Over 100 million people are resident in those cities. And they're from Goyang through to Sydney, through to Washington, some big and small cities all around the world. And so what this has given us is a load of best practice. And with those cities, we help them to benchmark. We have a system called the Gds Index, which Goyang has been using for the last, I think, four years or so, that allows us to understand how well this destination, the city, is doing environmentally, socially, how well that supply chain of tourism and events is doing. And so all the hotels, the airports, how well they're working with sustainability. And lastly, how the DMO and the city are working together around destination management. So that's what we do at the GDS. Peter's going to talk to you a little bit more about that, and I'm sure some of the other speakers will be referencing this work. So I just wanted to leave that with you. So we have what we thought now is share some kind of case studies. Really, what are the best practices at a really quick, high level of the things that destinations are doing and should do more. And these are also very relevant to anyone, I think. So I'm going to ask Noah now to help me with this. So now, can you lead off with these, please?
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Guy. So as you rightly says, Guy and Ed, I think, have very well clarified that we do need to take action. And the next question is, of course, what can we do? So we've prepared a list of 6 actions, which each of those also have a best practice associated with it. So action number 1 is often creating a new vision for success. And the example here is from New Zealand, from its strategy Tourism 2025 and beyond. And their vision, growing a sustainable tourism industry that benefits New Zealanders, is really not just about economic growth, but also about positive impact on both the environment and the community. And this really steps outside of this business as usual, make profit mentality. And what is also particularly beautiful about this vision or the strategy at large is how it weaves in the Maori heritage and culture into the strategy, and really acknowledging the history of the country, its roots, and the identity of New Zealand as a whole. Now, action number 2 is to collaborate and engage. And here Copenhagen is a forerunner with its 10x Copenhagen stakeholder engagement strategy, which really through regular interviews and surveys of local residents allows them to better understand the sentiment of the locals towards tourism. They also use a tool called TravelSat to gauge this resident sentiment. And this essentially then forms a baseline of qualitative and quantitative data that from the locals' input can then shape wonderful Copenhagen's strategy and actions. And what is also important to mention here that it's not just about collaboration, about engaging those stakeholders. It's really about collaborating with them in a co-creative sense, where it's not just asking them, but also really involving them in the process. For example, through a council of sorts, to really make sure that their voices are heard and integrated into the actions of that destination. And actually, one thing to add here also is that while these case studies may be for destinations, this is relevant for any business. Yeah? Any business affects local, a local community. And in that sense, it's very important to also get their feedback. So action number 3, sort of linked to this sentiment index, is actually about measuring, managing, and reporting on impact. Now, why is this important? This measuring, managing, and reporting on impact? Well, Jessica Vandy will talk a lot about this in a little bit more detail in a minute. But in essence, it's really about creating a benchmark, a type of baseline that future action can be based on. And the example here is from Sydney. So I'm also very delighted to have Katie Shamas from Sydney City, from the city of Sydney here with us on the call. So she'll explore this example in a little bit more detail. But look, I think what they've done fantastically well is to measure. Yeah, so the city of Sydney has assessed the environmental footprint of the whole city and identified that hospitality industry has a huge footprint. 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions, 46% of the commercial waste. And then the next step for them, of course, is to manage. And this led to the creation of the Sustainable Destination Partnership, and to really unite the industry, the hospitality industry, to reduce these emissions, to reduce water and waste. And lastly, it's really about reporting, communicating on how you have managed a problem and then communicating that impact. So there's an annual report that gets published to track this progress and then also ultimately support the city of Sydney to meet its carbon reduction targets. So action number 3, measure, manage, and report on impact. Absolutely crucial. So action number 4 is to educate and inspire. And here the example comes from Thailand's Convention and Exhibition Bureau, Gdsm for short, which have been providing education for almost a decade to their supply chain on sustainability and regeneration. And they collaborate with industry associations, such as UFI and the Events Industry Council, to provide industry certified courses. And why is this important? It's really to give the supply chain stakeholders the skill sets and tool sets required to implement sustainable and regenerative practices. And most importantly, inspire them in the first place. If they don't feel that sustainability or climate change is an issue, then they need to realize that it is. So, events like this can really be catalysts for that change by inspiring and educating shareholders and stakeholders into action. Now, action number 5 is really about catalyzing innovation. And here, Ljubljana Tourism and the Ljubljana Convention Bureau has done a fantastic job through the local food exchange, which is a type of trade show which brings together producers with buyers of the local food. So farmers from around Ljubljana together with hotels and restaurants, and also now hospitals and schools and the like. And innovation in this sense is really not about completely creating something new, but more about reimagining the past, reimagining the old. And this essentially led this local food exchange to an explosion of local food offerings, the diversity of local Slovakian flavors and dishes. And it really placed Ljubljana and Slovenia on the map for food aficionados. Now, for action number 6, this is quite important also, right? Co-creating a new story, really weaving together all the previous actions and making sure that it is communicated strongly. And also rewriting the actual narrative around tourism. So New Zealand's, this quote from New Zealand, I think quite pertinent in this sense. So the tourism story and experience preserves and enhances our values, culture, and heritage. It enhances our values, culture, and heritage. And this is quite different, quite a contrast to tourism as normal, which is more a story of degeneration, of degradation, where tourists come bringing cash, money, and that is done in exchange for culture, the environment, or heritage. So it really can erode the locals' values, culture, and heritage as a consequence. So we need that shift. We need that new story to really make people realize that tourism can be a force for good. It can enhance the values, culture, and heritage, and the beauty of a place. So New Zealand has created a comms campaign that really attempts to bring this quote to life, which involved locals sharing videos and experiences of their favorite places, showcasing their values and their culture with the world, while the country was restricting international visitors from entering at all. So here, those are the 6 actions that we recommend organizations to start with. And now over to Guy to summarize and close us off.
Thank you, Noah. Thanks very much. So here's 6 actions. These are actually 6 of 10 actions. So we're just starting with you on these ones and sharing a few. I think it's a lot about really thinking of the purpose of our organization. What do we stand for? What are we really trying to achieve as an organization other than just make money? How do we make money that makes a difference to the world and allows us to keep making money for a long time? Because otherwise, our world's not going to be here as we know it and to be so successful. So yeah, let's start to really think of that. And a lot of the other speakers are going to start to give us really great examples of this as we carry on. So I'm going to throw you out a quote here from a friend of mine. And he said, are we travel agents or are we change agents? So I think as we rebuild back after COVID, you really have an amazing opportunity to become a change agent. I don't think any other industry touches so many other industries as the meetings and events industry. So we can really help to catalyze all of our clients on their journey. We can really bring in the SDGs and we can make and help change happen. So that's my challenge to you, to be a change agent and not a travel agent. So that's a kind of wrap up of this bit of the session. If you'd like some more information, please reach out to us. We have a fantastic report called the Regenerative Revolution about the events industry and how that can change. We've done some really interesting works around regenerative funding and tourism taxes. We have an academy that talks a lot about this and goes into a lot of details with various set courses and certificates to help you on that. And of course, you can start benchmarking. So thank you very much, everyone. Back over to you, Noah.
Thank you, guys. So we are now in the 5-minute short Q&A phase. And there's only one question that I've seen so far, which is from Guy to Ed. So Ed Gillespie, if you could turn on your video and audio. The question is, how do you think leadership styles need to change in business? And in case he's taking care of his daughter, we'd of course be understanding and skip to another question.
Are you there, Ed?
I assume that that's what he's doing. He's putting out some fires, so that's understandable. Are there any other questions from anyone in the audience, from the panel, to presentation from Guy and myself in this case? Okay, well, if not, it's no problem. We can potentially use this time later on in the session for another short Q&A in this case. All right, now moving forward, I would like to introduce someone that has already been introduced, Peter Lee, the man himself. And he is, as most of you will already know, Managing Director of the Goyang City Convention Bureau. And Goyang has been on its own journey of sustainability regeneration in recent years. And so over to you, Peter, to share this with us now.
Thank you, Noor. 저는 한국어로 발표를 하도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 제가 말씀드리고자 하는 부분은 지금까지 2017년도부터 GDSI의 한국 자료 슬라이드 공유가 되고 있나요?
아니요, 지금 공유하겠습니다.
네. 고양 CBB는 고양 컨벤션 뷰로는 2016년 11월에 설립이 됐습니다. 그래서 사실은 그리고 고양시가 가지고 있는 그 당시의 환경은 물론 고양에서 지역 정부, 그러니까 지방 정부, 대도시를 제외한 그 지방 정부에서 한국 내에 있는 지방 정부 중에서 첫 번째로 만들어진 컨벤션 뷰로이긴 합니다. 그렇지만 킨텍스라고 하는 좋은 국내 최고, 한국 내 최고의 전시 컨벤션 시설이 있었음에도 불구하고 사실은 고양시가 마이스 목적지로서 어떤 그 브랜딩이나 브랜드나 아니면 그 가치 측면에서 보면은 그런 전체적으로 저희의 고양시의 브랜드는 굉장히 좀 낮은 수준이었습니다. 그래서 빠른 시간 안에 아니면 효과적으로 도시의 브랜드를 제고할 수 있는 방안이 무엇이 있을까라는 고민을 하게 됐던 거죠. 그래서 저희가 선택한 게 이제 지속 가능성이라고 하는 아젠다를 도시 브랜딩에 있어서, 그러니까 마이스 도시로서의 브랜딩에 있어서 좀 적극적으로 활용해보자 하는 부분이었습니다. 그 배경에는 고양시가 도시 브랜드 자체는 좀 낮았지만, 그렇지만 고양시가 한국 내에서도 살기 좋은 도시라고 하는 그런 인식이 전 국민들 사이에 있었고, 또 하나는 고양시가 꽤 친환경적인 요소들이나 환경적인 요소들을 잘 갖춰왔다는 그런 실천들을 많이 해왔다라는 것들이 있습니다. 그래서 2017년에 고양 컨벤션 뷰로는 한국에선 최초로 GDSI에 참여를 해서 지금까지의 지속 가능성 측면에서 데스티네이션 서스테너빌리티 측면에서 고양시가 어떻게 잘하고 있는지, 다른 도시들과의 비교를 했을 때 어떤 상황인지를 파악하는 것들을 이제 시작을 했고, 그 다음에 거기서 부족한 부분이 드러나면 그런 부분들을 개선하기 위한 노력들을 지금까지 해왔습니다. 그래서 오늘 저는 짧은 시간이긴 하지만 사업 추진 배경에 대해서 좀 더 구체적으로 말씀을 드리고, 그 다음에 지금까지 저희가 해왔던 사업 성과에 대해서 좀 말씀을 드린 다음에 마지막으로는 앞으로 그러면 이 데스티네이션 서스테너빌리티 관련해서 어떤 방향성을 가져갈 것이냐, 특히 시 측면에서 그렇다면 시정부가 해야 될 것, 그 다음에는 고양 컨벤션 뷰로가 해야 될 것, 이런 것들 역할에 대해서 좀 살펴보고자 합니다. 저희가 사업 추진 배경 조금 전에 말씀을 드리긴 했지만 지속 가능한 마이스 생태계 강화를 위해서 지속 가능한 전략이 필요하다라는 것이 저희가 이제 지속 가능성을 실천하게 된 배경 중에 하나입니다. 마이스 산업 규모는 전체적으로 커지고 있는 것은 분명하지만 대부분이 그러한 배경에는 하드웨어나 인프라 양적 성장에 집중해 왔던 것이고요. 다만 그리고 또 관광도 마이스 관광이나 레저 관광과 마찬가지로 사실은 관광이라는 것이 얼마나 지속 가능한 것이냐에 대한 부분에 있어서는, 그리고 기후변화나 탄소 절감이나 이런 거에 있어서 마이스의 역할, 또 고양시 투어리즘의 역할, 이런 부분에 있어서는 아직은 긍정적인 효과보다는 아니면 네거티브한 효과가 좀 많기 때문에 이런 부분에 있어서는 이런 것들 개선하기 위한 지속 가능 생태계가 필요하다는 것이 저희 첫 번째 배경이고요. 두 번째는 한국의 경우에 마이스 산업의 경쟁력이 어느 정도 국제적으로 증빙이 된 상태였지만 이 지속 가능성에 대한 개념이나 아니면 이것을 실천해야 되는 그런 인식이나 이런 것들이 좀 부족한 상황이었습니다. 그래서 이 부분에서 고양시가 조금 더 선도적인 역할을 하는 것이 좋겠다라고 하는 것이 하나의 배경이었고요. 그 다음에 연장선상에서 마이스 산업이 앞으로도 지속 가능하게 어떤 성장하기 위해서는 성장하기 위한 미래 경쟁력을 만들기 위해서는 이 지속 가능성이라는 것들이 꼭 필요하다라는 거예요. 마지막으로는 사실 국내도 해외도 마찬가지겠지만 국내에서도 보면 결국은 지자체 차원에서 아니면 공공기관에서 지속 가능성이라는 개념을 먼저 중요하게 생각을 해서 실천 노력을 보여야만 이것이 민간으로 전파될 수 있다라고 하는 그런 점에 착안을 해서 우선은 그렇다면 마이스 산업 전체에서 지속 가능성이라는 것을 전파하고 그 중요성을 높이기 위해서는 공공기관 성격이 강한 고양 컨벤션 뷰로, 컨벤션 뷰로 차원에서 먼저 시작하는 것이 좋겠다는 것이 이제 사업 추진 배경이 되겠습니다. 고양의 전에 이제 관련해서 고양시의 지속 가능성을 살펴봄에 있어서 고양시의 스왓 분석을 좀 했을 때 전반적으로 보면 시간관계상 다 말씀드릴 수는 없지만 고양시는 인천국제공항에서 좀 거리적으로 가깝고 그 다음에 전형적인 도농입니다. 도시와 농촌적인 성격이 잘 있고 그 다음에 현대와 과거 역사가 잘 보존되어 있는 도시입니다. 그리고 또 그 킨텍스를 중심으로 해서 여러 가지 그 마이스에 필요로 하는 그 주변 환경이 그 집적 시설들이 집적해 있는 어떤 그 마이스 그 집적 시설로서의 단지로서의 역할 그렇게 구성이 되어 있습니다. 그래서 그런 것이 장점이 되겠고요. 다만 마이스 목적지로서 그 저희가 이제 브랜드 도시 브랜드 자체가 좀 낮은 게 있고요. 그 다음에 그 호텔이라든가 이런 것들 측면에서 보면 마이스 인프라가 좀 부족한 것도 사실입니다. 그 다음에 마이스 산업 자체에 대해서 마이스 산업이라고 하는 것이 한국에서의 산업적 인지도가 좀 낮습니다. 그리고 시민들의 참여 수준이 아직은 좀 부족한 것도 사실입니다. 그렇지만 이런 것이 약점이 되겠고요. 다만 그 고양시 자체가 우리나라에서 한국에서 가장 살기 좋은 도시라는 것, 그 다음에 킨텍스를 중심으로 해서 다양한 그 여가 시설이나 아니면 공연장, 그 다음에 테마파크 또 산업단지와 같은 자족기능 성격의 여러 가지 시설들이 지금 계속해서 구축이 되어 가고 있다는 점. 그리고 서울이라고 하는 대한민국 수도이자 문화시설이나 이런 것들이 가장 인접한 도시라는 거죠. 그래서 이런 것들이 기회적인 측면이 될 수 있을 거라고 생각을 한 겁니다. 그래서 뭐 쉽게 얘기하면 고향에서 마이스 때문에 머물면서 서울을 즐길 수 있는 이런 것이 기회 요인이 될 수 있을 것이고. 다만 또 하나 이제 마지막으로 위험 요소를 좀 살펴보면 고양시 서울을 중심으로 해서 인근 도시들 간의 마이스 전쟁이라고 얘기할 정도로 그 경쟁이 굉장히 심각합니다. 서울, 인천, 수원, 또 고양, 성남 100만이 넘는 5개 도시가 서울을 중심으로 해서 5개 도시들이 마이스를 두고 경쟁을 하고 있는 상황입니다. 그리고 고양시는 기초 지자체입니다. 다만 이제 우리가 경쟁하는 수원이나 수원을 제외한 인천이나 아니면 서울과 같은 데는 광역도시죠. 그러니까 재정적인 지원 능력이나 아니면 행정력에 있어서 기초지자체보다는 더 월등한 지원 체계를 갖고 있다는 점이 있습니다. 그래서 이런 부분은 이런 것도 위험 요소가 될 수 있고 또 하나는 사실은 고향보다 킨텍스가 더 유명한 것도 위험 요소가 될 수 있습니다. 그래서 저희한테는 이러한 강점을 좀 더 강점과 기회 요인을 살리고 약점과 위험 요소를 제거하고 약점 부분을 강화할 수 있는 방향의 전략이 필요로 하는 것입니다. 그래서 이런 부분에 가장 강력한 그 수단으로서 저희는 지속 가능성이라는 것을 개념을 저희가 도입하게 된 것입니다. 그래서 그 고양시가 이제 마이스 목적지로서 고양시 비전을 저희가 넘버원 서스테이너블 마이스 데스티네이션 인 아시아 패시픽, 그러니까 아시아 태평양 지역에서 넘버원 지속 가능한 마이스 목적지를 만들자라는 비전 이런 겁니다. 그래서 그런 걸 위해서의 가치로 국제적 수준의 마이스 서비스의 체계를 구축하고 또는 여기 왔을 때 주최자들이나 아니면 참가자들에게 굉장히 높은 수준의 그 경험치들을 제공하고자 하는 것이 가치가 되겠습니다. 그리고 그 목표로서는 지속 가능한 마이스 목적지, 뭐 디지털이 결합된 융합된 마이스 목적지, 반복해서 찾는 마이스 목적지, 국제적 수준의 마이스 서비스 인증 체계를 구축하자. 그다음에 국제적으로 인증받은 마이스 목적지를 만들자. 이런 저희 나름의 비전과 밸류, 가치와 그다음에 목표를 수립하게 된 것입니다. 그래서 이제 아까도 말씀드렸지만 지속 가능한 마이스 도시를 만들기 위해서 저희가 이제 GDSI에 참여를 하고 도움을 받기 시작을 한 겁니다. 그래서 여기 보시면 Gds 인덱스라고 하는 것은 아까 가이아 노하우가 전 말씀드렸겠지만 전 세계에 있는 지속 가능 데스티네이션, 지속 가능한 목적지를 원하는 도시들이 함께 본인들의 4가지 분야, 그러니까 지속 가능성의 환경적 측면, 사회적 측면, 경제적 측면 외에 또 그러면 그러한 목적지를 만들기 위해서 CBB는 어떤 노력을 하고 있느냐. 그래서 DMO 측면 이렇게 4가지 분야에 있어서 저희가 71가지 측면에 있어 데이터를 제공하고 증빙자를 제공을 해서 얼마만큼 성취하고 있느냐 이런 것들을 하고 거기서 나타난 개선점들을 개선해서 그 지속 가능한 도시가 되기 위한 노력을 전개하고 있는데 고양시 역시 그렇게 해왔습니다. 그래서 2017년을 보면 저희가 성취도가 굉장히 낮았습니다. 그래서 32%, 48%, 54%, 작년에 저희가 56%를 했습니다. 그러니까 이 굉장히 보면 미미하지만 저희가 굉장히 그러니까 이런 작업들은 뭐냐면 부족한 전략이나 이런 부분들은 새롭게 수집하고 없는 데이터는 객관적으로 평가를 해서 다시 만들어내고 이런 과정을 통해서 저희의 그 질문의 답을 하나하나씩 하는 것들을 늘려가면서 저희가 이제 56%까지는 왔는데요. 저희 희망사항은 올해 2021년에는 한 70%를 넘어가는 것이 저희 목표입니다. 그렇게 되면 그래도 이제 중간은 좀 넘어서는 게 아닌가라는 생각을 하게 됩니다. GDSI에 있어서 저희가 이제 그 구체적으로 좀 보면 환경적으로는 저희가 이제 2020년에 51%를 했고요. 그 다음에 이제 사회적 측면에서는 저희가 76%. 그다음에 공급자 측면에서 보면 35%, DMO 측면에서는 64% 이렇게 되어 있습니다. 그러니까 저희가 이제 그런 부족한 부분이 어디서 나타나는지가 딱 나오는데요. 일단 환경적인 그 지속 가능성에 있어서 실천에 있어서 환경적 노력을 조금 더 해야 되는 게 있고요. 또 하나는 그 마이스 관련해서는 서플라이어 공급 체계, 그러니까 주최자들에게 마이스 서비스를 제공하는 사람들이 어떠한 그 분명한 목표하에서 지속 가능한 옵션들을 제공할 수 있는 방향을 개발하고, 그렇게 하는 서플라이어들에게는 그 가산점을 주고 각종 지원제들을 통해서 지속 가능을 실천할 수 있게끔 해야만 저희가 점수를 높일 수 있겠죠. 그러면 그게 저희가 이제 지속 가능한 도시, 서스테이너블 그 마이스 데스티네이션 고향으로 가는 지름길이라고 생각을 합니다. 그러한 노력으로 이제 여러 가지들이 저희들이 이제 노력도 하고 있고 성과도 내고 있는데요. 하나는 그래서 이제 성과를 조금 내고 있는데, 첫 번째로 이걸 위해서 저희가 만든 게 뭐냐면 태스크포스를 조직을 했습니다. 그래서 지난해에 고향 서스테이너빌리티 마이스 그 커미티를 만들었습니다. 그러니까 전문위원, 지속가능성 추진 전문위원회를 만들었는데, 여기에는 마이스 이해관계자, 그러니까 베뉴, 그다음에 숙박시설 호텔, 그다음에 PCO, 그다음에 학계, 그다음에 시의원, 시공무원, 그다음에 시의 정책을 담당하는 시정연구원, 이렇게 저희가 참여를 하고 있고요. 그다음에 시민사회도 참여를 하고 있습니다. 그래서 총 7명에서 8명까지, 8명, 올해로 8명입니다. 8명의 멤버가 저희가 정기적으로 모여서 그 저희 마이스 지속 가능성 전략도 검토를 하고, 또 실천 사항도 점검하고, 또 하나는 그 GDSI에 제출했던 데이터들을 그 결과물들을 같이 분석을 하고 개선 방안을 찾고 하는 노력들을 전개를 하고 있습니다. 그리고 이러한 위원회를 통해서 저희가 작년에 국내에서는 최초로 고양시 지속 가능한 마이스 전략이라는 걸 수립을 했습니다. 한 3개월에 걸쳐서 전문위원회들과의 토론, 그다음에 GDSI 컨설팅 팀과의 어떤 협업, 그다음에 그리고 저희가 초안을 만들면 그걸 GDSI 컨설팅 팀한테 리뷰를 받고, 그다음에 자문을 받아서, 그래서 그걸 통해 가지고 하나하나의 전략을 수립을 했습니다. 그래서 그 전략은 경제적 측면, 환경적 측면, 사회적 측면에 대한 요소들을 파악하고 있습니다. 그래서 총 3개, 그러니까 사회적, 경제적, 환경적 측면에서 3개 분야에 있어서 12개의 목표를, 저희가 주요 목표를 찾아냈고요. 또 하나는 50가지의 핵심 실행 계획들을 이 전략을 통해서 제시를 했습니다. 저희가 그걸 통해서 또 이제 고양시가 지속 가능성 관련해 가지고 이러한 노력을 통해서 몇 가지 성과도 저희가 도출하기도 했습니다. 첫 번째는 그게 뭐냐면, 첫 번째는 저희가 GDSI에 가입하고 나서 2019년도에 이카 총회에서 GDSI로부터 가장 향상된 데스티네이션 어워드를 저희가 수립했습니다. 그리고 또 하나는 한국 내에서는 가장 지속 가능한 마이스 도시라고 하는 브랜드 이니셔티브를 가져가면서 또 지속 가능한 마이스 도시라고 하는 브랜드를 점진적으로 쌓아가고 있고, 그런 것들이 지금은 마이스 업계에서 가장 지속 가능한 도시 하면 고양시 하는 정도의 브랜드를 갖게 되었습니다. 이것이 이제 저희는 국제적으로 확장되기를 바랍니다. 그래서 2019년 성과에서는 저희가 코리아 마이스 엑스포라는 곳에서 일체의 어떤 재생용품이나 일회성 도구를 쓰지 않고 지속 가능한 종이를 활용한 부스 또는 친환경 기념품 등을 만들어서 선보여서, 거기에서 저희가 그 해의 주제가 그린 미팅이었기 때문에 저희가 그린 마이스 어워드라는 거를 한국관광공사로부터 저희가 수상하기도 했고요. 그때 사용했던, 지금 보시면 2019년에 있는 사진과 2021년에 있는 사진의 벽체를 보시면 좀 비슷하게 보이실 텐데, 저희가 올해 고양시 킨텍스에 있는 안내 데스크를 조성함에서 이때 2019년에 만들었던 친환경 부스, 종이로 만든 부스를 잘 보관했다가 지금 다시 그 저희 안내 데스크에서 쓰고 있습니다. 이처럼 저희는 그 지속 가능성을 실제 실천도 하고 전략도 수립하고 그다음에 운영할 수 있는 추진 체계를 만들어 감으로써 어떤 더 발전할 수 있는 계기들을 만들어 가고 있다라고 말씀드릴 수 있을 것 같습니다. 그러면 앞으로 그러면 이 지속 가능한 마이스 도시가 되기 위한 고양시의 노력은 어떻게 되어야 하느냐라는 측면에서 보면 이걸 아까 말씀드렸듯이 시정부 측면에서 어떻게 할 일, 그다음에 이제 CBB 측면에서 할 일 이렇게 구분할 수 있는데요. 첫 번째는 이제 그 도시 측면에서 보면 지속 가능성 실천의 필요성을 조금 더 인지시키기 위해서 여러 가지 지속 가능 행사를 개최할 경우에는 유관기관의 그런 그 주최기관의 법인세 감면이라든가 아니면 인증패 수여라든가 아니면 고양시에 관련해서 이 사업권을 우선적으로 제공하는 등의 이런 것들을 고려할 필요가 있게끔 고양시 차원에서는 역할을 해야 될 것 같고요. 또 하나는 그 두 번째는 글로벌한 지속가능 마이스 도시라는 브랜드를 확립하고 경쟁력을 갖기 위해서 그 지속 가능성을 염두에 둔 전사적인 시정 운영, 그러니까 그 지속 가능한 시정의 이런 지속 가능성을 파악할 수 있게끔 해야 되고요. 또 하나는 이러한 그 지속 가능성이 마이스뿐만이 아니고 코펜하겐이나 이런 것처럼 지속 가능성이라는 개념이 시정 전체 또는 시에서 수립하는 조례라든가 이런 것들을 통해서 전반적으로 도시를 확산할 수 있게끔 도시가 노력을 해야 되고, 그다음에 시민들이 참여할 수 있게끔 시에서 여러 가지 캠페인을 해야 된다고 생각을 합니다. 자, 마지막으로 그러면 컨벤션 뷰로의 역할은 어떻게 되느냐? 일단 저희는 체계적인 지속 가능성 사업을 위해서 전문 TF팀을 인력을 지금 보강해서 팀을 꾸리고요. 그다음에 또 과학기술을 활용해서 지속 가능성의 성과 측정을 계속해서 하고 모니터링 시스템을 구축하는 것. 세 번째는 저희가 가장 부족한 부분이긴 하지만 마이스 업계 이해관계자들과 시민들이 공감할 수 있는 그린 마이스 행사를 기획하고 시민 참여를 높이고 서플라이 체인의 참여를 높이는 것. 그리고 그린 마이스 행사 개최 동료를 위해서 업계 관계자의 역량을 제고하고 이런 교육 기회를 타일랜드처럼 지속적인 교육 기회를 만들어내는 것. 이게 이제 CBB의 역할이라고 생각을 합니다. 지속 가능성, 그러니까 고양시는 이러한 노력을 통해서 어쨌든 저희가 이제 요즘 사용하고 있는 브랜딩이 데스티네이션 서스테이너블 캐피탈 인 코리아, 그러니까 마이스 캐피탈 인 코리아라고 하는 저희가 브랜드를 쓰고 있는데 진짜로 한국에서 지속 가능한 마이스 수도가 되기 위한 그런 노력을 고양 컨벤션 뷰로는 계속해서 해나갈 예정입니다. 이상 제 발표를 마치겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Peter. Very interesting. I think you touched on a lot of important points, right? So it may have started out with branding, the importance of branding, but it's moved towards truly engaging your stakeholders, making some clear targets which are not just related to branding, but then also measuring and reporting on your impact and setting up the systems to allow you to do that. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Jessica Vandy, who has spent the last 17 years in the tourism and events sector, mostly in Australasia, and most recently worked at Tourism New Zealand before launching our own consultancy to support the sector with developing and implementing social impact strategies. Now, what is impact? How is it measured? What is social impact specifically? All of this will hopefully be explained in a bit more detail by Jessica. Over to you. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Noah. Kia ora, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm just sharing my screen. All right. So today, well, that was a great lead in there, both from Peter and from Noah. Yeah, as we said, we're going to be talking a little bit about impact, but most specifically, impact for business events. So today I'm actually representing Meet for Impact, and I'm going to be sharing with you some strategies for defining, for managing, and for measuring the impact of business events. So to kick off, I'm going to be covering three things today. So firstly, using a common language, which is important both in sustainability and in impact and in business events. Then I'm going to be talking about how we manage and measure impact. And then I'm going to be looking at some practices or some strategies for maximizing impact for destination management organizations. So firstly, using a common language. In business events, we hear these terms often: sustainability, legacy, impact. They're used interchangeably, but they do have very different meanings. So firstly, let's define impact, because this is what we're going to be talking about today. So we consider impact to be the sum of changes that are generated by an organization through its actions on its community or ecosystem, which also take into account the needs of stakeholders and the system targeted. And this is impact that's really achieved by an organization. So let's think about what social impact actually is. So social impact or societal impacts can reflect a positive outcome on a societal problem or condition. They can help produce a social asset or generate a new common knowledge or create a new way of thinking. They can help respond to an existing gap or need, whether that's in knowledge or creating some kind of new solution. And social impacts can also be unforeseen and purposeful as well. So if we think about these three concepts, sustainability, legacy, and impact, well, sustainability as we know it has actually evolved a little bit more since this description back from 1987 in the Brundtland report, which said sustainability is really a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Well, we think this has evolved a little bit since then. And by evolved, we mean sustainability is probably more now about balance. So the balance between, creating inclusive economies, between prosperity, healthy ecosystems, and the environment. And when we think about legacy, well, legacy is actually a concept that has really come strongly through events. And it's understood to be, a gift, something that gets left behind. Sometimes there's a monetary value associated with it, but these are generally created by an action such as an event or a business event. Now, legacy is an interesting term because more recently we're actually hearing the term legacy misinterpreted. So it's often misinterpreted as the change that occur when in reality, legacy is actually the mechanism which creates the change. And we have to remember that legacy is very centered on an organization. And when we start to think about impact, impact are actually the benefits or changes that occur over time, and these changes, occur for stakeholders and they'll experience the result of these actions. And impact can actually be the result of a really good sustainability strategy or a really good legacy strategy. So as we start to think about them as strategies, if we're thinking about sustainability, it's, we can evaluate, some of our priority sustainability issues and come up with objectives and actions that will help us to mitigate the negative and amplify the positive impact of our actions. And when we're thinking about legacy planning, legacy is really planning for the maximum outcomes of events by having a strategic and purposeful approach to both event management and event attraction. And impact management is actually the combination of both of these. It's actually the practice by which an organization purposefully manages its resources and assets to bridge gaps and meet explicit impact goals while fulfilling the business objectives. And impact measurement is actually a subset of impact management. And it's the process that we use to understand how much change has occurred. So we look at what change has been attributed to an organization's activities. And so why do we manage and measure impact? Well, impact management is, in its most simplest form, is to mitigate our footprint. And by footprint, we mean reducing the negative effects of our activities on the planet. And we also want to amplify and communicate our handprint, and our handprint being the positive impacts that you're helping to create. And so what are some of the benefits of impact management? Well, firstly, impact management really helps you to understand how your activities are actually impacting people and planet. They help support your organization's strategic priorities by demonstrating, really clear actions and outcomes. They help you to identify areas for improvement, and you can actually, create decisions based on the data that you have. It will help you to engage and take your stakeholders on an aspirational journey. It will help recognize tourism-related activities as a net creator of value, and it will also help to identify where future business opportunities might lie. And speaking of aspiration, the reason that you're all here is because you want to learn and you want to understand. You're actually on an aspirational journey because you want to be part of something much bigger and better. And aspirational journeys are very appealing, especially for some of our younger audiences, because they want to be involved in projects and programs that are really making a difference for people and planet. So impact is also a really great way of amplifying and reinforcing business objectives. We do often hear from destinations, how am I going to focus on an impact project, or how am I going to meet my impact objectives while I'm still having to do my day-to-day business and ensuring that my business is growing and thriving. Well, if you're truly serving your clients the way you should be, by having a sustainability strategy, by managing your social, cultural, and environmental assets, naturally you're going to meet these business objectives. And this is a message that you should really be communicating to your stakeholders. So what are some practices to maximize impact for destinations? Well, the UN World Tourism Organization, through its Restart Tourism campaign, actually really communicated that we must take into full account the economic, social, and environmental impacts. We must consider the role of the environment and people and communities, and we must not work in silos with our visitor economy. So what are some of the positive impacts of tourism and events? Well, we already know how much the visitor economy, particularly from business events, contributes. And this can be through the catalyzation of innovation, through further development of research, through knowledge transfer, through some of our partnerships that we create as a result of business events. But the missing link has actually always been how we measure impact, because it's not that simple or not that easy to do. And that's why it's incredibly important for destinations to actually have a management and measurement program, and why you should consider an impact strategy. And the reason for this is, firstly, an impact strategy helps you create a really strong narrative. It's also going to help you develop data and metrics, and then you're going to be able to use both of these to communicate these stories and demonstrate the positive impacts, back through your communities. And so as a destination, how do we do this? Well, firstly, you really need to consider what your assets are. What are the assets that sit within your own organization? Whether it's your central government or local government strategy, whether it's the strategy within your DMO, whether it's your sustainability strategy, or whether it's looking at, what memberships you participate in, in organizations such as GDS. How are you going to leverage these assets? And then the second is your industry ecosystem. Consider who your industry are. What are your partnerships and how you can engage with them and involve them? Who is in your visitor economy? Who are your tourists, and what are your events that are going to drive change in your community? And of course, finally, are you leveraging your local communities? Very often, local communities are left out of discussions and engagement. So take them on that journey, understand their needs, and get them to contribute, and see how tourism can create a positive change. So now, very quickly, I'm going to cover 6 strategies that are going to help you maximize your impact. So firstly, and very importantly, develop a strategy that really aligns the purpose and delivery of your actions with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and embed these into your existing local and national SDG strategy. Strategy number 2, develop a pathway that is going to help you generate and measure some of the broader social impacts by using events and conferences. Events and conferences are amazing assets for your city and destination. So consider how you might develop a purposeful strategy around identifying events that you want to attract and what change they might be able to bring to your destination. And then consider how you might define your intention around these, how you might manage and mobilize your stakeholders, how you're going to monitor and measure, and then how you're going to communicate this back to your stakeholders, to your community, and to your clients. Strategy number 3, involve your resident community and have engaging conversations, meaningful conversations about tourism that's happening in your city and the impact that it will have on your residents. having a survey or just surveying your residents alone is not enough. Actually create opportunities for discussions, for engagement, so that you can create a really comprehensive framework and action plan that is going to maximize impact in your destination. Strategy number 4, and I've seen some great sustainability strategy from Peter. So turn this sustainability strategy into a monitoring dashboard and consider, what your indicators are going to be. What are your outputs and outcomes? Firstly, link your objectives, and your objectives being, what do you want to achieve? Link them to your actions. Identify what you do want to achieve. Look at what some indicators are, indicators being how you might measure. Look at your targets. What is it that is going to demonstrate success in a project like this? And consider how you might produce outcomes. Now, something I do want to touch on very quickly here is indicators are a very important part of an impact journey. And there's 2 types of indicators, process and output, and also outcomes. And you're going to need to have both. So process and output indicators are things that where you measure the actual activities that took place, the audience that was served, the number of products. It's these types of measurements that you do need, and they do need to come through very strongly. But secondly, you need to also look at outcomes. So what are your short-term, your medium-term outcomes? What are your final results going to be? And what are the impacts going to be on your beneficiaries? Because impact is all about your beneficiaries. Strategy number 5, how you're going to measure your impact. So develop a measurement framework. So at Meet for Impact, we have a framework called Be Impactful Framework. And what it does is it looks at 8 common capitals, and capitals obviously underpin well-being. By having a measurement framework, it actually helps you to demonstrate your actions and outcomes. It will help you to look at your visitor economy, your events, and look at how you might improve some of the value in these capitals. And when you're taking on an impact project, just ensure that you are measuring and you do have really strong indicators that you're going to be able to demonstrate and show that back. Strategy number 6, report on your impact. So when you're developing an impact project, reporting and communicating this back is going to be so critically important for your stakeholders. So, you're going to need to develop some kind of impact activity report. And an impact activity report is not just an annual report, it's not your business report, it's something that is done in addition to your reporting, to your normal reporting. And what we like to see in a good impact report is it has to be outcome driven. It also needs to be beneficiary centric, so very focused and centered on the beneficiaries. It needs to be able to demonstrate impact indicators that will also show change. It's also going to be very rich in storytelling, because we're going to be, involving a lot of qualitative data that will help you to tell your story and really demonstrate the true value of your business event and the change that has occurred. So just to recap, there are really 6 strategies. There's probably more, but these are 6 strategies I really wanted to cover today that are going to help you maximize impact as a destination. And just to recap, they are aligning your strategy with SDGs, developing a specific impact strategy for business events, implement a community inclusive tourism approach, so engaging with your local community. Take your sustainability monitoring dashboard into something a bit bigger. Adopt a measurement framework with indicators, and of course, report on your impact. But there is one more thing that you should really consider, which is, of course, join the Gds movement. I know Goyang are very much part of the index, but come on board and join the academy so that you can be on this journey to measure, to manage, and to maximize your impact as a global destination. So there's one more thing I want to leave you with, and this is a question for you as a destination. What practices are you, Goyang, your destination, doing or implementing towards maximizing and measuring your impact? Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jessica. I think that was very well presented and very fitting also in the scheme of the rest of the session. really brings into practice a lot of the concepts that we talked about more on a theoretical level before. So now we're going to have a short 5-minute break. So tech team, please bring up the slide, and yeah, have a quick water, a quick pee, go to the bathroom, and then in 5 minutes sharp at 9:30 exactly, we'll all be back here and start us off with the panel discussion.
Great. Well, it's time to move on again. So I hope you managed to grab a quick cup of coffee. For some of us, it's breakfast time. For some of you, maybe it's almost evening time. So, well, let's move on. So I'd now like to start with a fantastic panel. So we've got three of our amazing destinations, three real leaders and pioneers in sustainability. And I'm going to ask well, these three very wonderful and powerful ladies to give us a presentation about what they're doing, a short presentation, and then we're going to some kind of question and answers, which again, like everyone out, as we said before, you're invited to ask these guys your own questions. So we have Louisa from Berlin, we have Katie from the city of Sydney, and we have Birgit from Helsinki. So really fantastic. So let's start, and let's start with Birgit from Helsinki. Birgit, welcome. Really fantastic to have you join us. Helsinki's done some amazing work. I'm a real big fan of your city as a visitor, as a place to organize events, and I just love you guys and what you're doing. And perhaps importantly, you're one of the kind of the real pioneers and the creators of the Gds Index. So you've been with us from our initial moments in 2010 when we first did a workshop where we created the concept of an index, and where we launched in 2012. So welcome, Birgit, over to you.
Thank you so much for your missing headphones. Just a second. There you go. Sorry for that. Thank you so much for your kind words. It's good. It's always good to start with that kind of introduction. So hi everybody, I'm Birgit Liukkonen from Helsinki Marketing, and today I will tell you about a digital service we launched in Helsinki in 2019 called Think Sustainably. Let me just share my screen so you can see my presentation. There you go. Hope you can see it now. So when the service was being built, a study was made by the city of Helsinki, which stated that 66% of Helsinki residents identify the climate crisis as their major concern when thinking about the future of the city. Now, climate change, as we all know it, affects us all and affects our quality of life. And we in Helsinki believe that combating it is not a task for a small minority, nor is it their privilege. And Helsinki is committed to promoting a more sustainable way of life for everyone. Now, in accordance with the city strategy, Helsinki is aiming to reduce emissions by 60% by year 2030. And the target is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2035. But how does it come down from the strategic level to the operational level? The question we asked ourselves was, what if making sustainable choices could be easily embedded into your everyday life? So to this background, Think Sustainably was born. It's a service that combines sustainable experiences and transportation in a city into one easy-to-use digital service, which can be found on the platform myhelsinki.fi. Now, the base of the service is on sustainability criteria that have been tailor-made for Helsinki, together with a local think tank, local sustainability experts and interest groups. Now, the criteria highlights ecological sustainability, especially focusing on climate crisis, but it also considers social sustainability and has a strong focus on environmental factors. It's accessible to different types of service providers. Currently, we have 6 categories of service providers, restaurants, cafes, and bars being one, shops, attractions, accommodation, events, and venues being the rest. And it's also part of the design of the service that the criteria fits all. So whether you are a service provider, whether you are a small business owner or a big hotel chain, the same criteria fits both of them. If you are, for example, a venue or an event, or any of the other service providers. Now, this is how it looks like on the website, myhelsinki.fi. So the service basically just filters local businesses from the database of the website and shows the ones that operate exceptionally well when it comes to sustainability. In each of the service category, there are a minimum number of requirements that the actor must implement in order to fulfill the criteria. And the ones who do that are marked with a green tab that you can see here and that you can see throughout the website as well. So the criteria itself includes different aspects. We have energy related criteria. We have food and beverage related criteria. We have items that are specifically designed for a shopping category. We have other that it covers basically different environmental factors. And of course, we have social sustainability, which has a strong role in the criteria as well. And here you can see that the criteria and the explanations are open to anybody to explore. So when you go on the website and you click open any of the criteria, you can see in more detail of what's it about, what the certain criteria is. So whether you are a service provider or a visitor to the website, anybody can see what the criteria is about. So now I'd just like to highlight a certain key element of the service, trust and transparency being one of the key factors of the success of the service. So it's a service based on trust. It's not a new official sustainability label or certificate, and therefore the fulfillment of the criteria is not evaluated by a third party. So even though the actor gets, the business gets a green tab on the website, it doesn't mean that it's a new kind of label or certificate. So we don't audit the service. We trust that the service providers are the best informants of their actions and wishes to pursue sustainability. And we also expect them to regularly brief their own employees on their company's values and visions of sustainability and what they want to achieve with that. And another part of the trust factor is that we give our website visitors the possibility to give us feedback. So those visitors who have had experience with the service are encouraged to give us feedback by matching the criteria with their actual experience, and just send us also positive feedback of the businesses involved in the service. So as a conclusion, the objective of the service is threefold and quite simple. It's there to help locals and visitors to choose more sustainable ways of living urban life every day. So we believe that by enabling people to make sustainable choices easily, we are actually encouraging them to change their lifestyles. Now, as a service provider, the criteria can be used as a set of tools to develop your operations if you are a service provider. And it makes it easier to see the whole picture and any potential development areas you might have. Then again, if you are a business who already has a strong set of values based on responsibility, it helps you communicate about your work and make your work visible. And thirdly, by inviting local businesses to share their own best practices, we believe that they encourage one another to make more sustainable choices. So the service itself becomes a platform for action that encourages a positive flywheel and simultaneously accelerates the sustainable development. So from our point of view, contemporary climate responsibility means that the sustainable lifestyle should be an easy choice to make for anybody, whether you are a visitor or a local or a service provider. So by creating these unlikely alliances and working with partners and shareholders, which have not likely to be our partners, has an advantage. And by doing together, we believe that we create the new normal when it comes to sustainability. Thank you.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. Thank you, Birgit. I love Think Sustainably. I love the work you're doing there. We're going to move on, but I'm going to throw out a question for you that we're going to come back to. I want to know how you track the effectiveness and the impacts of that. So think about that and we'll come back to that.
Sure.
Because that's the one thing I've been really interested in. How do we measure success? So good. Okay, so now we're going to go from one part of the world to the bottom of the world. So I'd like to invite Katie from Sydney. So Sydney, again, you're I'm a massive fan of the work you're doing. I think you've done some amazing work in Sydney. And so Katie, over to you.
Thanks, Guy. Hi, everyone. You can see it's twilight here, the other end of the earth from where Bridget joins us in Helsinki. So thanks for having me today. We have this wonderful thing in Australia called an Acknowledgement of Country. So I guess before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land I live on and where I'm presenting to you from. Australia exists on the land of the longest continuous culture in the world. There were 500 different nations on this continent that we now call Australia prior to European colonisation. And I live on the land of the Darug Nation, and they sustained this place for 60,000 years, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. So I've been asked to share with you all what Sydney has been doing regarding sustainability in our destination sector, but with a particular focus on how we use measurement and data to inform our work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact of climate change on tourism. Then I will share the city's ambitions for Sydney before getting into the detail of how we use data and measurement to drive that work. So well before COVID, in 2017, something momentous happened for the tourism industry in Australia. Tourism officially overtook coal exports as Australia's second highest source of income, and it was beaten only by iron ore in terms of its value to our economy. So in 2017, Australia received 8.6 million international visitors. It earned $41 billion, and employed 580,000 people. And that's an amount 15 times more than the coal mining industry. Now, obviously, with our borders closed, that with COVID, that situation is very different now. But the recovery, tourism is going to play a very significant part in Australia's recovery post-COVID. The other important point I wanted to make about tourism in Australia, it's very nature-based. People come here because we have many beautiful places, our beaches, national parks, wildlife. But it's also this reliance on nature-based attractions that Australia's tourism industry is also highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. In 2018, our Climate Council released this report, Icons at Risk, which really talks about the threats to our natural world. And I guess it doesn't really matter which of our tourism icons you are talking about. Climate change poses significant risks. There's the Great Barrier Reef, which everyone, it's the most obvious example, but it's also our beaches are at risk of sea level rise, and also you'd all know about our 2019 summer of fires, which came after a very extensive drought and also decimated huge areas of our national parks. And I guess Sydney.
Katie, sorry to interrupt your flow. Your presentation isn't currently sharing. Did you want to share the presentation that you prepared?
I'm so sorry. I thought I shared.
No problem.
Absolutely. Thank you, Noah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that sharing now?
Not yet, but alternatively, as a backup, we do have the presentation on file and could share it for you if you think that would be easier.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, I think so.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. So I guess Sydney is also naturally beautiful and is also the main gateway for all the other beautiful attractions in Australia. And I guess there's, as an industry, we have a role to play to reduce our impacts and protect our environment, which is where our profits come from. So there's, an onus is on us as an industry to do what we can to reduce our environmental impact. Which I guess is where Sustainable Sydney 2030 comes in. So this is the City of Sydney's ambitious plans for our community and guides all the work that we do at the city. It's soon going to be even more ambitious. We're releasing our Sustainable Sydney 2050. And I think an interesting point to make is that, all our strategies engage very deeply with our community about where their areas of concern and opportunity are. And, we surveyed our community before COVID and after COVID. And actually climate change increased in terms of its importance in the community's mind. So currently there are 10 strategic directions for the city, and my area of focus is around the city being a leading environmental performer. So I guess I'll just touch briefly on our targets, which have all been brought forward. So we currently have our environmental strategy out for public exhibition, and we're bringing forward our net zero emissions from 2050 to 2035, recognising the increasing threat of climate change and the need to accelerate action towards that 1.5 degrees temperature rise. We're also looking at reductions in water use, as well as waste sent to landfill. These targets, I think it's important to note, don't just apply to us as a city, as an organisation. It's for the entire place that we call Sydney. So we need to work with everyone to get there. And that brings me to the first way that we use data. And that's to help inform who we work with. So you'll see here on the pie chart, there are 3 key sectors that contribute the most to the emissions of the city. And our sector, which is the destination sector, known here as the accommodation entertainment sector, contributes 20% of the city's emissions, but it also contributes 40% of all waste sent to landfill and 14% of our drinking water consumption. So by identifying the destination sector as a key contributor to the city's environmental impact, we developed up our strategy, making Sydney a sustainable destination. And our vision is for Sydney to be a leading sustainable destination for leisure and business travellers. Our plan details 20 actions to help us get there. And some of the key mechanisms that we use to implement those actions are through the Sustainable Destination Partnership and, of course, our participation in the Global Destination Sustainability Index. So I'm going to talk about a couple of those because it kind of speaks to how we use data and measurement. So the Sustainable Destination Partnership has been in operation since 2018 and was one of the first things we did together. And one of the first things we did together was data and measurement. So throughout 2018 and 19, we collected resource use and other data across the partnership to understand our baseline. We collected data on energy and water use and waste sent to landfill. We also went through an extensive process to understand the softer measures of our sustainability. who has an environmental policy, who embeds sustainability in procurement, how they engage with visitors, those types of softer measures of sustainability. And I guess we went through this data and measurement exercise with the 45 partnership members for a few reasons. It was to understand our baseline from which we could measure success, so some of the impact work that has been spoken about earlier. It was also to engage partners in a broader sustainability conversation, and also to understand where the opportunities are for our collective effort. So for example, going through this data and measurement exercise with our partners, we discovered that waste was an area of significant opportunity. All the businesses that participate weren't getting accurate data from their waste contractors. And so, that was an area that we could collectively work on together. And it also kind of highlighted that capacity building within our partner organisations was also an area of significant opportunity. All this data collection that we did in our first year together was used to develop what we call an annual reporting and data framework, and that informs all the work that we do together. These are some of our partners. So one part of our framework is annual measurement of our impact. So on an annual basis, we ask our partners how they are tracking towards our collective targets. And so here are the results from our 2020 report, which is an update from the slide that Noah shared earlier about this partnership. So you'll see here that we've had a 10% reduction in total emissions. We've had 0 increase in potable water, and we've had 70% diversion from landfill. There's obviously been a COVID impact on some of these kind of resource use targets, but the big success has been the capacity built of our partnership members, which we found that during that COVID lockdown period where they weren't operating as normal, while that brought down resource use, it also created all this time that our representatives could use on developing their organisational strategies and policies regarding sustainability. So a key part of this annual reporting process is tracking our impact, but also having the opportunity to engage again with our members. So it acts as a reminder to partners of their collective impact, of their collective commitment, and also by bringing it together in an annual report, it also enables us to share those stories more broadly. So we share the annual report with all our partnership organisations so they can share it within to their executive, but also across the sector. So we want our members to be acting sustainably, but we also want that leadership to influence the actions of the broader destination sector. And one of the last, So one of the last areas on measurement I wanted to speak to is, of course, Sydney's participation in the Gds Index. So we work every year with Business Event Sydney to recognise our achievements on the international stage. Sydney went from 15th to 8th between 2018 and 19, and in 2019 we won the Innovation Award for our Sustainable Destination Partnership. And I guess we do participate in the Gds Index first and foremost to measure how we are performing against other destinations, but we also participate in the index to promote the work Sydney does internationally, but also to seek the opportunity to keep improving. That the Gds Index identifies gaps that we can work on within the next year, but also to help others on the sustainable destination journey. So I guess I just wanted to close by, summarising why Sydney uses data and measurement. And we do this to understand where our effort in sustainable action should be focused. We use data and measurement to determine the success of our projects and how we are tracking towards targets, to engage with stakeholders on sustainability more broadly, and also to understand where our collective problems and solutions lie. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Katie, for that illuminating presentation. I love the work you're doing. I think you're really excelling in that management approach of how you collect data, and you're still, you know, I think you were one of the first destinations in the world to do that. A few destinations now are doing that and claim to be the first, and I will say, actually, you're not. So great. So I love, we built up from Katie's talking a lot about Birgit was talking a lot about kind of communication aspects. You were talking about more the management, the data aspects, the engagement aspects. Let's hand it over to Luisa. Luisa from Berlin. Welcome again, another pioneer in the work you're doing. And this time we're going to focus a little bit more on the meetings and events aspect, of which you excel at. So over to you, Luisa.
Thank you so much, Guy, and hello to everybody. I'm very happy to be here and represent Berlin, the Berlin Convention Office of Visit Berlin, and I'm starting to share my screen, which you should already be able to see now. So I'm going to tell you a bit more about our sustainability initiative for the MICE industry of Berlin, which is called Sustainable Meetings Berlin, for events that make a difference. First of all, the most important thing, the vision we are following, or our great vision we are sharing with our partners and stakeholders, which is that we want to make Berlin one of the most innovative and sustainable destinations. And how can we achieve that? What do we think will help us achieving that? So we do have this, this initiative, Sustainable Meetings Berlin, which we started working on in 2017 and launched officially in 2019. And it is made up of mainly 3 pillars, the most important parts of this initiative. And I want to go into detail of all 3, which are community, our community in Berlin, the certification scheme, and last but not least, the online platform we are providing to event planners. So first of all, our partner community. When I'm talking about partners, I mean the suppliers, event service providers of Berlin. And it is very important for us to have created this community and to extend it to involve more and more suppliers. And with this partner community, we are trying to create awareness for the topic. We try to help building capacity and as well provide kind of a safe space for the suppliers, for the community to talk about the topic, to really get into exchange, to as well talk about problems, challenges they are facing. Some things we are doing to foster this community, to strengthen the community are regular sustainable MICE meetups we are organizing. Also brainstormings or working groups. For example, like in 2 weeks, we're having a first brainstorming on how might we reduce the rubbish that is created by events taking place in Berlin. And as well, we are organizing and providing workshops and consultancies to our partners and stakeholders. And all of that, of course, free of cost for the suppliers. Also, we have created a certification scheme for event service suppliers. We are certifying them and to make them be a sustainable partner. And this means that they have to go through an audit, which is based on a catalog of criteria that we developed. through stakeholder workshops and well, taking into account recognized frameworks, international and national frameworks, such as, for example, the Global Reporting Initiative, various ISO standards, as well as the German National Sustainability Code. What came out was a total of 62 process-oriented criteria, and they are covering 4 areas, which are social topics, social criteria, environmental criteria, economic criteria, as well as governance, risk, and compliance, which includes all of the regulatory topics, yeah, and risk management, obviously. Very important for us was that it's not designed as kind of a checklist, but really like a management system, which allows our suppliers to really start a continuous improvement process within their company, within their business organization. So how did we develop this, this catalog of criteria and the whole certification scheme? First of all, we started working with an external sustainability consultancy to assure the quality of the criteria, and as well to assure that certification in the end will be a third party, so to not have us as Visit Berlin going into the organizations of partners and auditing them, but to have them to have that process sourced out. So we started working with an external sustainability consultancy, organized various stakeholder workshops to do our materiality analysis, so to see which topics out of this huge range of sustainability topics are really the most important ones for our business, for our industry. We then worked on the detailed elaboration of the criteria together with our external sustainability consultancy and evaluated this criteria with stakeholders again. And what turned out was our final certification scheme we are using now since 2018 to certify partners. The third pillar, which is the online platform, is as important as the certification scheme for our local partners, because with our online platform, we are informing, inspiring event planners from all over the world to think of their event as a more well, sustainable event, to plan it in a more sustainable manner, and to help them doing that, not only to inspire, but to help them doing it, we provide various tools on this website, like, for example, in a green encyclopedia. We do have a toolbox with various sustainable ideas for planning components. We do list, obviously, our certified sustainable partners on this platform, on this information tool, so that planners can really, in a quick oversee, find sustainably certified service providers. And as well, we do provide things like sustainable event guidelines, so that clients will really have a guideline, a checklist, to make sure to think of every bit and piece they might be able to implement or to change to have a more sustainable event. Also, I want to share with you that we are just starting into the process of extending this movement that has been, like I said, focusing on the mice industry, but we're feeling, or we have seen even more with COVID, with the COVID crisis, that there is more and more interest as well of mainly touristic partners, touristic suppliers. And also we really feel that we cannot only focus on one area or one part of the industry, but really need to include all stakeholders. So we're just starting into the process to have another participative process of, well, creating a joint initiative for the whole tourism and events industry. So we're looking into, on the one hand, as well, developing a set of criteria for touristic stakeholders, so to be able to offer them as well this management system, the certification scheme, but on the other hand also to create an easier access, which might be something kind of a sustainability code we are looking into developing, because we are seeing that there's a lot of very small stakeholders as well. So we do have, for example, guides of guiding people through Berlin that are like really interested in becoming part of our movement, and that would really want to show their focus and their commitment. So we really feel that we need an access which makes it easy for everybody to get on board of the initiative, but as well to develop and if possible to, in the end, well, not in the end, but to as well be certified. So yeah, we've just a week ago or some days ago sent out a survey to get a first idea of what does the industry really need. And this will be followed by stakeholder workshops again. We are as well working with our external sustainability agency to assure, well, high quality. And yeah, really looking forward to extend our movement, extend our program. And yeah, if we do have the chance, I will be happy to share more as soon as we know what our new initiative will look like. And that's all for now. We are always happy if you would like to know more, if you get in touch. And yeah, thanks from my side.
Fantastic. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed that, Louisa. I love how all three speeches have come together, how you really nicely explained that stakeholder engagement process, how you create a certification. Then we heard, you know, how to really get all your partners together in Sydney, how you use data to drive decision making, and then from Birgit, the power of communications and story to that. So this is all really good. I'm gonna throw out a question to the audience actually, which came from Sandra. Sandra said there's a group of university students in the audience, and I just wondered if they had any thoughts or any advice to us about what they're doing in creating their own sustainability movements. And so I made a little quip there that we need a kind of Korean version of Greta Thunberg. Love to hear from any of the students in Korea, whether you've got any advice, any things that you're seeing, any things you expect really from business today as you start your journey of and your career. So I throw that out. If anyone wants to throw that into the chat box, that'd be wonderful. Good. Okay, time's running out. It never kind of goes to plan, as we saw with Ed and his daughter. And so let's kind of keep flexible. Let's keep nimble with this. And so I want to move it on to the next part of the show, which is really about storytelling. So kind of building a little bit up on Helsinki and how they communicate. I'd like to introduce our chief storyteller, which is, and I'd like to introduce Melissa. So Melissa is the chief storyteller of the Gds movement. So good morning, Melissa. Melissa's joining us from South Africa. And I've known Melissa for a long time. We've worked on lots of projects around sustainability and through our friendship. And so Melissa, over to you. Please take go and share some of your knowledge and experience from the world of branding and your experiences working with communication.
Okie dokie. Let me just see if I can get my presentation. Hello, everyone. Just give me a second. Oi. So we've heard some incredible stories this morning, and I'm having trouble. Hold on a second. Could you just give me a minute? I've got a bit of a...
So let me
just,
sing a
yeah.
dance. And I'll kind of, you know, I don't have a joke, but Melissa worked for many in the ad world, worked for Ogilvy Earth, working with big brands on sustainability campaigns and programs. And so when we work together with destinations, we bring that kind of big brand aspect to how do you build a destination. And I think that's really, really interesting these days. And how do we integrate sustainability into the core DNA of the brand of the destination? Or for you that aren't from destinations in the audience, maybe you're from a venue or a hotel, it's exactly the same process. How do we really get sustainability and regeneration into your DNA? So so that's really what we're...
I'm so sorry. It's absolutely impossible to get my presentation going. I'm not sure what's going on, but
That's
I know
okay.
you've got a copy there.
Yeah, we can share our one. So maybe you can just...
that would be fantastic.
Let's bring that and then I'll share that. So,
thank you. Good. So you see, we had to plan for the unexpected, and it's always the technical check that goes wonderfully well and then something tremendous happens. But good afternoon, Korea. And thank you so much to Peter and the Goyang Destination Convention Bureau. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity to talk to you about the power of story. So as Ed spoke about this morning, you know, what is the future that we're looking for? And what is the future that we can aspire to? And what are the stories that we're going to tell our children about how this all came to be? I mean, the IPCC report, the astonishing issues facing us from climate change, from biodiversity collapse, from this extraordinary COVID pandemic that we've had, is really causing us to ask the question, once upon a time, once upon a future, what were we talking about? And now we're talking about imminent horror stories. But where are the opportunities for us to connect and transform our relationships with each other? So this is really the opportunity to look at transformation and how we can regenerate not only our relationships with each other, but with our business relationships, with our interconnectivity in our biodiversity systems, and how do we put ourselves in the heart? You know, our connection with the natural world, 150,000 acres of rainforest is lost every single minute. Can you imagine how many millions of acres have been lost since this presentation began? So how do we fit into this web? How do we become really, really adept? And what can we do to share? So we've worked on a different number of strategic suggestions for storytelling, and we've seen some really wonderful examples. In the next slide, we look at how these stories can become part of our patterns. You know, Homo sapiens, great human beings, are wonderful storytellers, and our ability actually is instinctive to connect and to tell stories. And if you think about it, our words and our stories are the most renewable resource on the planet. So how do we use these stories to create and actually help all of us regenerate and transform? And it's about target market. You know, very classically, marketing was always about target markets. We need to be very specific as to what our target market is. But rather than thinking about your business to business target group or your business to consumer, consider person to person. And I loved what Birgit from Helsinki said, that you need to communicate to make your work visible. And look at us, we are all humans. We're working together We're trying our best to find pathways to the future that are offering the legacy and our children a better place to be. So how do we tell these stories? I think what Sydney has done so successfully, and thank you, Katie, for your beautiful opening to your speech, because I've never seen anybody acknowledge the land that they are hosted on. And that to me was an immediate way to activate the heart. We've seen Ed this morning with the story of his fatherhood, activating our hearts and bringing out our compassion. So a key part of developing a good sustainability narrative is very much about activating the heart. And we need to be bold, we need to be really engaging, we need to be unapologetic about how we are talking about the crisis that is facing us at this time and how we can actually create stories of hope. Guys, the presentation, oh, it's not that one. We need to go to the next slide, please. So we see brands have taken very, very conscious decisions, and they are actually so responsible for so much of the narrative and the general narrative that's in the world. And we see some of the biggest brands claiming spaces in a story hierarchy. So the story hierarchy looks very much like the hierarchy of needs that you might have been exposed to in psychological theory. But somewhere in our human interactions and in our ability to actually converse with each other, we look at the different levels, and each destination has a heart. Each destination has significant natural assets, human capital. So the stories of sustainability do fit hierarchically in our human value system, and how we can actually bring together a much more comprehensive and beautiful story that inspires, that gives courage, that educates, and also helps to demystify a lot of the jargon. This is an incredible example of how two very well-known figures in the Western world have been brought together. And I'll talk to you a little bit further about this concept of narrative after you've watched the video.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, Roger, how are you?
Just relaxing in the Swiss Alps. Take a look.
Yeah, it's good for you. Listen, about the Switzerland film you want me to do?
Yeah, did you see the boot film I sent you?
I'm watching it as we speak. I don't like it.
What?
Just look at where you are, Roger. I mean, you got your mountains, your skiing resorts, your charming little towns, your green valleys. There's no drama. No drama at all.
Seriously? But did you see the bits with the sunset?
Roger, from a certain type of actor, I need an edge, conflict, jeopardy. Switzerland is just too perfect.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. You guys are too nice. You should have said, fuck you.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, Roger, how are you?
Just relaxing in the Swiss Alps. Take a look.
Yeah, it's good for you. Listen, about the Switzerland film you want me to do,
Yeah, did you see the boot film I sent you?
I'm watching it as we speak. I don't like it.
What?
Just look at where you are, Roger. I mean, you got your mountains, your skiing resorts, your charming little towns, your green valleys. There's no drama. No drama at all.
Seriously? But did you see the bits with the sunset?
Roger, from a certain type of actor, I need an edge, conflict, jeopardy. Switzerland is just too perfect.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. You guys are too nice. You should have said, fuck you.
Okay, listen. How about the two of us on this special mission? We ski down the slope.
What, skiing down the slope together?
We go even skydiving.
Come on.
Then we land on these fields and the cows are grassing.
Roger, I have to be honest with you. It's not happening.
Ah.
Sorry, Roger. Maybe call Hanks.
Who?
So this was just such a clever way of bringing in the beauty of Switzerland and the magnificence of the destination. But there was such a beautiful opportunity to bring in sustainable, which is one of the most remarkable strategic programs that the Gds movement has been able to witness, because this is so important that the destination story starts to incorporate what it's doing in terms of environmental, social, and economic governance, improvement. And it would be lovely that sustainability, which is so often used as an adjective in English, is brought down into more what it means for the environment, what it means for humans, what it means for society, what it means for cultural legacy. And I know Goyang has got such ambitious goals and astonishing plans afoot. And it's going to be so wonderful to see, because strategy is what creates fantastic stories. Guy and Noah shared some great examples of how the collaborative nature, the opportunities for the use of data is able to generate the stories of hope. I am not sure if we're going to be able to see the other videos that I had in the presentation. I'm conscious of the time that's available.
Melissa,
Pardon?
can you just tell us next slide, because our Korean team are managing the presentation now.
Okay, because I'm not actually seeing the slide. All right, there we go. Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, I'll do it. It's all right. We're back on. We're back
Okay.
on. Good. Brilliant.
Great. There we go. Fabulous. Thanks. So as Guy and Noah shared, the 6 actions, we have 7 top tips for regenerative storytelling. The first one is that you need to really make it local and authentic. Guy and Noah referred to this beautiful example earlier, but the way that New Zealand is actually turning their strategy into a story, and it's really bringing out the human values of respect and hospitality and generosity and guardianship. These are words that we need to bring more into our vocabulary as we start to create the story of the future we want to have. I think the next slide explains that the New Zealand wonderful social media campaign, where New Zealand gets the sun first. So you had these incredible humans, people, New Zealanders going, good morning from the world, good morning. And it's just about activating the heart. And it's what I referred to earlier with the incredible challenges we face. We have the opportunity to become closer, more connected. And it's our stories that tell that. You'll see in the next slide that the story doing of Ljubljana, this was also another reference that Guy and Noah showed earlier, but again, I'm using it to say that when you have a good strategy, you have a wonderful story. This brought producers, people around food. You know, the food is one of the most fundamental human activities, the enjoyment of food, the sharing of food. This was able to connect farmers, to really help people to understand where their food came from. And that became much more able to connect buyers and the local hospitality industry to local producers. So it becomes contextual and much more nature-based. The next slide, we've already seen Katie explain the latest data results, and thanks, Katie, for that. But most important, I think what Sydney has done is shown that the data has been able to help collaboration, and the data helps to inspire action. It was wonderful to see that there's been 0% increase in potable water consumption. And when you start to look in the recent results, when you start to look at that, you can see how benchmarking is really a very fundamental first step in this journey towards regeneration. And the next slide. Be careful though, because jargon and data can also be completely overwhelming. And it also needs to be relevant. You know, most people are still trying to learn what a carbon footprint actually is. So it's important when you look at infographics and when you look at presenting your data, that you use icons, that you use symbols that are easily assimilated and recognizable, and make it inspiring. We say jargon sometimes jars. The next slide, you will see how important a single visual image can be in explaining a tremendously huge concept. This picture was taken in 2017 by Justin Hoffman, who ended up winning the Environmental Photographer of the Year competition. Every one of us have heard how many million tons of plastic ocean pollution there happens to be. But this heartfelt image of one of the most unique creatures in nature, one of the most astonishing stories of evolution, with his prehensile tail tied around an earbud. And since that photograph was taken, if 150 million tons of plastic waste enter the ocean every year, 10 million tons into the ocean every year, that's 40 million tons since that picture. So stories can also be heartbreaking. Stories need to move people to action. If anybody ever uses an earbud after seeing that picture, I'd like to invite you to remember that picture. The next slide is a bit of humor, because we need to remember to laugh, and that's a fundamental way that we learn too. It's a lovely video and a great example of how Oslo is dealing with the waste issue.
Oslo is rubbish. Don't believe me? Let me show you around. Take the leisure experiences. Frankly, garbage. Your towel, Peter. Then there's the food scene. A complete waste. Rubbishimo. Even the bikes are garbage. Unloved and fit for the scrap heap. I mean, who would peddle this junk? As for the art scene, nothing more than recycled rubbish. Still, as they say, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
And the last example is just the most inspiring conversation to the human heart. And I think that you need to see it. So watch it and you'll see what I mean.
Listen, it's the 2020s, and freedom still can't be taken for granted in many places around the world. But for us lucky ones who think we have it, do we ever really stop and think what it actually consists of? Here in Helsinki, freedom is about becoming the best version of yourself without compromising on your well-being. We believe freedom is finding a healthy balance in life, getting support in reaching your dreams, accessing nature wherever and whenever, and loving whoever you love without holding back. But that's just our take on it. What does freedom mean to you? In this limited documentary series, we'll share stories of Helsinki freedoms as told by award-winning directors. Tune in now. The new city of the free welcomes you.
It's so interesting to have this in context to what Birgitte has been talking about and how inclusive and inspiring their sustainability platform happens to be and how truthful and transparent. So this brings me to the end of the presentation in terms of icons, steps, and suggestions for good storytelling. But we are in the most unbelievable change that I think humanity has ever faced. We're looking at opportunities to be able to embrace regenerative practices. We have wonderful opportunities to reconnect with each other, to make our sector the most important part of a regenerative future. And we also have the opportunity to create, tell new stories that bring us together, that no longer divide, that no longer accuse, and that no longer compete. The fundamental of regenerative living systems thinking is inclusivity, diversity, and the way that a good story continues to live is that it is shared. And going back to what Ed said this morning, you know, wouldn't it be wonderful to look back and say that the future that we wanted was able to happen because we were able to tell better stories. And with that in mind, if you would like to learn from the GDS Academy, we have a wonderful series of masterclasses, and one of them is the series Storytelling and Communication Strategies for Regeneration. And we'd love to see you, and we'd love to assist you on the journey. And more importantly, we would love to share your wonderful stories. So thank you. Thank you to Peter. Thank you to everybody who's hosted this day. And I hope you've learned something tremendously wonderful. And this is a story you will tell.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you very much. So to close us off, before I hand over to Peter and Guy, I would just like to share the third poll. And the question for this poll is, how important is it to you individually to see sustainability and regenerative strategies integrated into the rebooting mice industry? So please, the poll has been launched. Select which of the answers you would answer for, and then I'll share it out afterwards. And you'll have about a minute, and then we'll hand over to Guy and Peter. And so far, the answers are very, very clear. It's either extremely important or slightly important. Good. So this session seems to have fulfilled its purpose, if you didn't think so beforehand already. Okay, so a total of 85% believe that it's extremely important, 15% slightly important, and no one does not care. Everyone cares. That's wonderful. And no one thinks that's not important. So on that positive note, I believe, I hand over to Guy and Peter.
Well, thank you, Noah. Thank you, everyone. A wonderful set of speeches, very inspirational. I think we've really identified some wonderful best practice from around the world, from within Asia Pacific and from Europe and elsewhere. I know I've learned a few things this morning. So thanks, everyone. Thanks to the speakers, and thanks for people who turned up. I now bring it back over to our host, really, the steward who made this all happen, who's been pioneering himself. So Peter, would you like to kind of close this session officially for us? or not. Maybe you just would like to keep it going. So, Peter, are you there?
지금 제가 thank you.
We can hear you.
나 안 보이는데요.
확인하고 있습니다. 잠시만요.
Thank you, speakers, and especially thank you, Guy and Noah. Our original plan, without the pandemic, we can set up we can wrap up this session. We go to the Korean style, the barbecue restaurant, and enjoy the bomb shot, right, Guy?
Yeah, totally. We need a few bomb shots and some good barbecue. And I got some more of your country to cycle around. So yeah, count me in, and I'll see if I get a few more people on the bike.
We will see the next year. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, speakers, again. And actually, this is final message of the GDSM AP Forum. And you know, the GDSM AP Forum is the last program of the Goyang Destination Week. So I'm going to announce the closing of the GDSM AP Forum and announce the close of 2021 Goyang Destination Week. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participating, and see you next year. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
People there, you stay on.